Wealth, power, and influence, Donald Trump has it all. The money, the women, and the luxury. But even though Trump came from extreme wealth, he presented it like having earned it from the ground up, which was a mix of half reality and half fantasy. Love him or hate him, Trump life's story is nothing short of wild. It has been a roller coaster ride of controversy, scandal, and unprecedented moments that have captivated the world. At the age of 9, Trump was already a millionaire, thanks to the $413,000 he got from his father when he was just 8 years old. This is the insane life story of Donald Trump.
I will bring it back bigger and better and stronger than ever before.
Trump's family name was actually Drumpft, but it was changed to Trump during the war in the 16 centuries. Donald was born on June 14th of 1946 in Queens, New York. He entered the world with a silver spoon in his mouth. He was the middle child of 5 kids, the son of an immigrant mother from Scotland. But his father was his greatest influence, and he had big plans for the young Trump. His dad made a big fortune taking advantage of post-World War II government programs that funded affordable middle-class housing complexes during New York's rapid growth. Fred Trump was born in the Bronx to German immigrants Frederick and Elizabeth Trump. After he finished high school, he took a job as a carpenter's assistant. He liked the job, but he wanted to be the boss, so when he turned 21, Fred incorporated a company, E. Trump and Son, named after his mother, who started the company way before Fred was old enough to run it. By all accounts, Fred Trump was an obsessively hard worker. He built one of New York's first modern supermarket and sold it for a profit. He then used the profits to buy a subsidiary of a bankrupt real estate company. That subsidiary gave him easy access to a bunch of properties that were nearing foreclosure. Fred bought them low and sold them high, and he made enough money to turn E. Trump and Son into one of New York's biggest real estate companies. So, growing up, the young Trump was the rich kid on the block. Donald and his siblings grew up in a house that had 23 rooms, and a family chauffeur drove them to school every morning. But even still, his hard-working father forced him to have a newspaper delivery route to teach him hard work. Fred focused on teaching his son the ways of the real estate business, taking Donald to construction sites from a very young age. Fred also passed on his ruthless streak. He instilled in his son a deep drive to win. To win at everything he does, throughout Donald's childhood, his father always gave him the same advice: work hard and don't be weak, be a killer. He would tell Donald that he was raising him to be a king, and that he must become a killer at anything he does. He was kinda tough on Donald because he wanted him to be a winner. Donald took it to heart. At school, he was extremely aggressive. He bullied his classmates, he bullied his younger brother, and one day he even punched his music teacher in the face. But this does show you some of his current personality that started shaping up from a very young age. Anyway, Fred immediately took action and sent Donald to a military boarding school to live full-time to whip him into shape. It was a tough, competitive environment. It was a place where physical brutality and verbal abuse were tolerated and even encouraged. But surprisingly, for a rich kid who had a chauffeur and lived in a comfortable 23-roomed house, Donald thrived. Proving to himself and others that he wasn't just another rich kid, it helped fire up his competitive nature. And soon he would be getting good grades. He excelled at several sports and was named captain in his senior year. And in the yearbook, he was named ladies' man. All while going around telling fellow students that he is going to be famous someday. Years later, Donald would credit his time at New York Military Academy with teaching him the discipline he needed to succeed in business and in politics. But he knew that discipline by itself wasn't enough, so he went to college. 2 years at Fordham University before he transferred to the University of Pennsylvania, where he graduated in 1968 with a degree in economics. However, Trump's academic records have never been released, and in 2015, his lawyer threatened legal action against his high school and colleges if they were ever leaked. After graduating, Donald joined his father's company, and for the first few years things were tough. Donald and Fred had to roll up their sleeves and turn around some housing projects which were losing money. And for Donald, it was an early lesson. And after the 3 years apprenticeship, Donald took over the company. The torch had been passed from father to son. And his first move was to rebrand. E. Trump and Son sounded old-fashioned. A modern real estate business led by a young entrepreneur needed a glamorous name, so Trump rebranded it to Trump Organization. His father had already built a successful business in affordable housing, but Donald had a bigger vision. He promised to build 20,000 units, more than his father had built in his entire career. Donald was determined to take his father's legacy to new heights, to focus on luxury real estate and high-profile projects in Manhattan. His first major breakthrough came in 1976 with the Commodore Hotel in Manhattan, a decaying property near the Grand Central Station. Donald partnered with Hyatt and transformed the hotel into the now famous Grand Hyatt. At that time, many buildings in Manhattan were facing foreclosures. The Commodore itself was $2 million in debt, and New York was not seen as the luxury vacation spot it is today. The investment was a big risk for the young developer. But using the negotiating skills he talks about so shamelessly on the campaign trails, Trump convinced New York City to give the hotel a 40-year tax break, which saved $160 million. This marked his entry into New York's competitive luxury real estate market, and the start of a career that would soon be full of controversy. In his late 20s, he starts to turn his attention across the river towards Manhattan. The epicenter of wealth, prestige, excess, and attention, Trump moved to an Upper East Side apartment and started to go to some of Manhattan elite nightclubs, usually with a beautiful woman. He started marketing his most important commodity, which is himself, and the first time the New York Times mentioned Donald Trump, it wasn't for a good reason. At this point, we are like in the 1970s, the Civil Rights Act had just passed, which made it illegal to discriminate against people of color, and to enforce this, the Justice Department would send undercover agents to different apartment complexes to make sure that landlords weren't discriminating on who they rented to. This was a routine thing that they were doing. They would send a black person undercover to apply for an apartment. And it eventually happened to the Trump apartments, and they quickly started to see a pattern, where black people would be told that there was no available units in that complex. And then right after, the DOJ would send in a white person looking for the same type of apartment, only to find out that suddenly there was a room available in that complex. And one day in 1973, that Trump and his father are hit with a lawsuit. The headline said it all. Major landlord accused of anti-black bias in city. The lawsuit alleged that the Trump organization discriminated against African Americans. In one testimony, an employee said that she was directed to tell the black applicants that the rent was twice as much as it actually was. And when they asked the supervisor why they denied certain applicants, the supervisor replied that she was just doing what his boss told her to do. I am not allowed to rent to black families.
When the black testers came, they were shown, they may have been shown apartments, but were told nothing was available. Whereas when the white testers came, yes, there were things that were available. That would be the norm.
And if the Trumps did rent to a black person, Goldweber recalls, they would do so only at one building in Brooklyn, reserving the other buildings for white tenants.
He's a racist, beyond any question.
It's not a racist. There's not a racist. This guy treats everybody like shit. He is not a racist, okay? It doesn't matter if you're black, white, lesbian, transgender. He treats everybody the same, okay? And he went to Elton John's wedding. He's an asshole. That's different from being a racist. He's obviously an asshole.
Even for someone who believed that all publicity was good publicity, this lawsuit was a pretty huge deal. It was one of the largest fair housing cases at the time. The DOJ found that this was widespread, happening all over in Trump's 14,000 units. 27-year-old Donald Trump was furious. Most of the lawyers Trump talked to urged him to settle, but instead of admitting to these allegations and settling with the DOJ, he fought back. The thing is that when Donald Trump is called out for something, his response is often to fight. The Trumps responded by countersuing the Department of Justice for $100 million for making false statements. Although it was unsuccessful, the Trumps fought on during this time. Trump said, "I'd rather fight than fold, because as soon as you fold once, you get the reputation of being a folder." So he kept on fighting without any solid defense. And finally, he was forced to fold. But the final settlement ultimately allowed the Trump organization to get away without admitting any wrongdoing. Trump strikes a deal with the DOJ that would only require him to make a bunch of changes in the organization, like emphasizing that his apartment complexes are open for people of all races, taking out ads in the papers saying that Trump apartments actually do welcome black renters. But he didn't have to admit any guilt, and that was actually a win for Trump, and a lesson he'd carry with him for the rest of his life. Do whatever it takes to win and never admit your mistakes. Fight till the death, even if it means cheating.
Cheating in golf at all is completely wrong because it's the easiest sport to cheat at. But it reveals your character that you don't. Or it reveals your character that you do. And he cheats all the time. There's your ball. Usually you would put a mark down, pick up the ball. What he does, he secretly puts the marker on the end of the putter, and then he looks like he's marking it, but really, now the mark is 3 feet closer. That's a way easier putt.
When Trump moved to Manhattan, Manhattan was kind of a city in decline. It was full of empty, crumbling buildings. But Trump came in with a huge vision to resurrect the city. Trump soon set his sight on something that could make his career. The old Central Road that had gone broke a few years earlier left behind 3 prime real estate assets: the Commodore Hotel and 2 rail yards on New York's west side. The rail yards were the largest undeveloped tracts of land left in Manhattan. And if Trump could get his hands on those assets, he'd prove to anyone, including his father, that he could succeed as a developer. And after pulling some strings for weeks, Trump got what he wanted: the rights to develop the sites. Over the next years, Trump used his father's connections, reputation, and money to buy old decaying buildings and give them prestigious renovations. But he knew that this wasn't enough to silence his critics, who kept saying that he was only in that position because of his father's money and connections. And besides, it wasn't enough to satisfy his own ambitions. If he truly wanted to be the king of New York real estate, he had to build something big, so Trump literally aimed for the stars. Trump built his signature project, Trump Tower, a 68-story building in Midtown Manhattan, and the city loved it. It was a welcome renovation, a unique style of a building, but no one loved it more than Donald Trump himself, because he was winning. He had built a physical expression of his love for opulence, status, exclusivity, and attention. But remember, winning is not all that matters to Trump. Next, he needed to make everyone know about it, and he needed to control the narrative. The story couldn't be that he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, or that a lot of these deals were made with a combination of tax exemptions and, at times, full-on lies to banks in order to secure funding. That is something we know now because court rulings have come out to prove how shady a lot of this was. But at the time, the story needed to be that he was this smart, hardworking guy. And honestly, there's no doubt about that. But this is where Donald Trump's master storytelling comes into play, showing his ability to subvert the law while crafting a story about his success that people would just eat up. In his book, he says, "I play to people's fantasies. People may not always think big themselves, but they can still get very excited by those who do. People want to believe that something is the biggest and the most spectacular." He became good at getting in front of the camera, telling the story that you want to hear, that we all want to hear. He bought fleet of planes from a bankrupt airline and started his own airline, Trump Shuttle. He plowed money into expanding his casinos in Atlantic City, but in hindsight, the most important thing he did was to release a book. The Art of the Deal. The book was about Trump's life, career, and business strategies. It was a massive success and stayed on the New York Times bestseller list for 51 weeks. The book helped cement his status as a larger-than-life personality in the business world and beyond. It was his gateway to what would become his future career. By the mid-1980s, Trump Tower and big personality had made him famous, giving him the platform to keep selling his fantasy persona as a rich party animal, always surrounded by beautiful women and famous people. And there was perhaps nothing that helped elevate this image and storytelling more than the New York tabloids. The tabloids that years later, Trump would build a political career upon opposing. In the late 1970s, he was anxious for their attention and approval. Trump appeared on the front page of the New York tabloids 87 times in the course of just 15 years. And this was not by accident. It was by design. It was a part of his strategy for learning how to work human psychology and the media to get attention. He became an expert at getting people to pay attention to him, for good and bad, and finding a way to get whatever he wanted to be published. Trump has been having an affair with actress Marla Maples, who later became his second wife. And this affair became so juicy to the New York tabloids that it was everywhere. And instead of hide from it, Trump fueled it. Because it added to his image, it was during this years that he learned that all press is good press, so he got really good at planning rumors about himself using fake names. He would call journalists and pretend that his name was John Barron to give them information about himself that would benefit himself. Like in 1984, when a Forbes reporter was assembling a list of the 400 richest Americans. Trump called pretending to be John Barron, saying that he is the vice president of the Trump Organization, and that he knows how much Trump owns of the family business, thus how rich Trump is.
Okay, and would you say, in excess of 90% of the ownership of the...
I'd say in excess of 90. In fact, it's really closer to even the ultimate, but it's in excess of 90%, yes. Just consolidated. I think last year somebody showed me the article, and I think you had 200 and 200, and really it's been pretty well consolidated now for the most part.
But Trump was lying. He didn't own 90% of his father's business. But it totally worked. Forbes ended up coming with a list that said Donald Trump was worth $100 million. But later, we learned that he was only worth $5 million. To Trump, winning meant making people think you won. making people think you are worth $100 million, even though you are really worth $5 million. The truth doesn't matter. Perception matters. He gave them the drama that they wanted about his divorce and relationships, and in exchange he got the attention that he used to craft his image. Donald Trump is a constant liar. He is probably the most documented liar in human history at this point. A Washington Post report found that he has made over 19,127 false or misleading claims during his first presidency. Throughout the 80s and the 90s, Trump's name started to appear on everything. Trump magazine, and then he launches an airline. The airline did fail in a couple of years, but remember Trump's rules. He never admits to failure. He claimed that it was a success. He launches a board game, which is relatively Monopoly with a few tweaks. Properties bearing the Trump brand name, condominiums, golf courses, and hotels start appearing everywhere, from Atlantic City, Chicago, and Las Vegas, to India, Turkey, and the Philippines. Trump opens a slew of casinos in New Jersey that help revive Atlantic City. These casinos were over-the-top excessive luxury, just like everything Trump touches. He helped start an American Football League to compete with the NFL when the USFL failed. That didn't work out. Trump ended up suing the NFL for violating antitrust laws. The jury found the NFL guilty. But no one was prepared to what happened next. They awarded the damages in the amount of just $1. It was a symbolic gesture and a slap in the face of Donald Trump. He launched a vodka brand and then, of course, the beauty pageants. He bought up major beauty pageants. And he continues to put his name on everything. He is on the cover of Playboy. He creates a real estate investing course that he calls his university. He launches a travel and tourism website, a mortgage company, a men's clothing line. There's Trump Winery. We kept finding new things every week that Trump's name was on, like urine test kits and then water with the guy's face on it. Trump could brand anything with his name and face. He had become a symbol of prestige. But what you must know is that he didn't own most of it. He just licenses his name. They simply give the people who own them permission to use the name at a fee. Trump's image had become his greatest asset, appealing especially to the American middle class. Most people would see all of these products and think that Trump owned all of it, that he had this massive empire with dozens of products. Leasing his name allowed him to build an empire of products without using his own money. And when these businesses failed, Trump could pocket his profits and cut ties without facing the fallout of the business folding. This was actually smart. Trump's main skill was being a marketer, a showman, a sales pitcher, the ability to sell himself. His rise is almost entirely explained in his ability to do that.
The best way to treat a woman is to treat her like duty.
No, I never said that. But
You never did?
It was attributed to me.
So you never did say that?
No, I never said that, but it was attributed to me.
I see. So you treat women with respect?
I can't say that either.
All right, good, all right. Somewhere in between.
I do. I treat women with great respect.
Treat women somewhere in between respect and do-do.
A big part of Trump's image was that he was consistently surrounded by beautiful women, and at least 26 women have come out publicly accusing him of some form of sexual misconduct. This includes his ex-wife, who accused him of sexually assaulting her, but she later softened the allegation after a legal settlement. This is a long list of women and accusations, and each have a specific context and results. However, he denied all of these claims, but that was before he knew he was being recorded.
I gotta use some Tic Tacs just in case I start kissing her. You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just I don't even know. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything, whatever you want. Grab them by the I can do anything.
In the late 1990s, a pair of Forbes journalists were sent a leaked copy of a financial disclosure statement that Trump had to fill with New Jersey's Casino Control Commission. The report revealed something which no amount of bluffing could hide. Donald Trump was drowning in debt, and he fought so hard to keep the story from being published. But it went to print anyway. The statement revealed that Trump was inflating his net worth from $0 to $500 million. And remember, by then, being seen as rich and successful was an important part of Trump's business strategy. So, the accusation that he wasn't actually as rich as he claimed to be was a big blow. The revelation that Trump and his businesses were struggling financially marked the end of peak Donald Trump and the beginning of the hardest period of his entire career. So, what happened? When Trump began his career, New York was experiencing a major economic and social crisis. So, he took advantage of low property prices and tax breaks, since the government was desperate for extra revenue. When the economy rebounded, his fortune grew rapidly. His entry into the casino business followed a similar pattern. He got in after New Jersey had just legitimized casino gambling. Most of Trump's acquisitions were funded by debt, and that wasn't a problem, so long as the economy stayed strong. But that's not what happened. Right at the beginning of the 1990s, the US economy slipped into a recession, and Trump's businesses were all dependent on high levels of consumer spending. And when the economy slowed down, people stopped spending money, and Trump started losing cash. At one point, Trump Organization was $3 billion in debt, and in order to stay afloat, Trump had to sell his yacht, airline, and half of his first ever real estate project, the Grand Hyatt Hotel, one of his 3 casinos, declared bankruptcy. Trump was forced to give up his ownership while the properties kept the Trump name to preserve the Trump brand. Donald and his businesses were involved in over 4,000 legal cases in the U.S. federal and states courts, including battles with casino patrons, million-dollar real estate lawsuits, personal defamation lawsuits, and over 100 business tax disputes. Trump's critics greeted his downfall. To them, his problems proved that the image he portrayed of being a self-made man who won by taking bigger risks than anyone else was fake. Instead, they argued that he only got to where he was because he received the sort of help other people didn't have access to. Generous tax breaks from the government, and millions of dollars from his father. That Trump took big risks because he knew he had a safety net, and it was those risky high-profile investments that elevated the Trump legend. But just when it looked like Trump had hit rock bottom, he sold the development rights of the West Side rail yards to a consortium of businessmen from Hong Kong. This act saved him from the ultimate indignity of filing for personal bankruptcy, and it marked the beginning of one of the most famous and controversial comebacks in history.
I win. You always win.
By the early 2000s, his brand was kind of losing its luster. His business empire started to decline rapidly. His casinos were filing for bankruptcy. His glory days seemed to be over. But that would change in 2004, when he was able to once again monetize his persona. From now on, he wasn't going to be the biggest developer in New York. He had to become something else, and if he was going to reinvent himself, first, he needed a comeback. Comebacks are a key part of Trump's psychology. They are his way of telling himself and the whole world that, even though it looked like he was losing, he actually wasn't winning yet. And the other thing to know about a Trump comeback is that the facts come second to the story. And that's not to say that the comeback wasn't real. It was. Trump went from a net worth of negative $900 million to a positive $700 million in just 5 years. But he was never content to let the numbers speak for themselves. In words and deeds, he told the whole world that he was back. He started splashing out on high-profile assets. A 70-story office building at 40 Wall Street, which he renamed the Trump Building. He released The Art of the Comeback, a book-length announcement that he was back, and that he remembers the names of everyone who deserted him in tough times. Telling everyone that he was back generated business opportunities, positive media stories, and a sense of momentum that was impossible to resist. It was genius of him, because people just love a good comeback story. 6 months after the 9/11 terror attacks, a man named Mark Burnett came to see Donald Trump with an idea. He just finished producing a popular primetime TV show called Survivor, and he wanted to remake it. Only this time, instead of being set in the jungle, it would be set in the boardroom. Trump would be the boss looking over his vast business empire, and they would be contestants who would compete to impress the boss, and a couple of years later after the visit, the debut episode of The Apprentice went on air. More than 20 million people tuned in every week to see contestants face off in various business-related challenges, but the real star, like always, was Donald Trump. NBC quickly shelved plans to have rotating hosts and build the entire show around him. The Apprentice was one of the best things that ever happened to Trump. Over the 14 seasons he was host, Trump made close to $500 million from his salaries, and it also did wonders for his reputation. By beaming him into millions of homes every week, The Apprentice was a major step in the transformation of Trump from being primarily a real estate developer to being someone whose main business was selling his own name.
You talk in your book about getting even, the importance of getting even. Is revenge sweet?
I believe strongly in getting even. If somebody has hurt you, if somebody's gone out of their way to hurt you, I think that if you have the opportunity, you should certainly go out of your way to do a number of them.
When Donald Trump was down and out, he made sure that he remembers the names of everyone who deserted him during his tough times.
You know, some of the people that were most loyal to me are people that I didn't think would be. Some of the people that were least loyal to me are people that I think I would have treated them differently. I think I would have treated different groups differently. I would have wiped the floor with the guys that weren't loyal, which I will now do, which is great. You know, I love getting even with people. But
you're going to get even with some people.
Yeah, I know, if given the opportunity, I will get even with some people that were disloyal to me.
Here comes one of the things they say about you is that there ticks within you a vindictiveness.
I want to know who's the person that gave the whistleblower, who's the person that gave the whistleblower the information, because that's close to a spy. You know what we used to do in the old days when we were smart, right? With spies and treason. We used to handle it a little differently than we do now.
Trump takes pleasure in insulting, humiliating, and degrading other human beings. If you read his tweets, it is just one vicious attacks and humiliating insult after another. It's like, how can someone come up with thousands of vicious things to say about so many people?
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
30 years before he ran for president, Donald Trump was always talking about the same issues.
People think America, wealth, this and that. The Japanese are saying that. What a wealthy country. I mean, they're saying it and they're laughing. The country's losing $200 billion a year.
And he didn't just talk about politics on TV. The guy spent nearly $100,000 on a full-page ad where he criticized the U.S. foreign policies. Trump's politics were somewhat shaped by his fear of weakness. He became active in politics because he claimed that the U.S. was acting weak toward Iran.
Best made, the most modern, the best, and they say no? Who are they to tell us no? We're not going to give you our minesweepers. It's ridiculous. They're only there for the sake of us as far as that's concerned.
After the success of The Art of the Deal, Trump realized that the public wanted to hear what he had to say, even about issues outside of real estate, and he enjoyed moonlighting as a political commentator. And in 1999, Trump became curious about a potential run for the presidency. A political consultant he started working with commissioned some polling, and more than 3/4 of respondents said they'd never vote for Trump.
I mean, I think he has, a monumental ego. He comes off as being very, what's the word I'm looking for? Arrogant? Yeah, he's arrogant.
But despite that, he had good raw material to work with. Donald was one of the most famous people in America, and people loved his story. They saw a successful businessman who embodied the American dream. They saw him as someone who got things done. This bolstered Trump's belief that if he put his mind to it, he could be president. But before he could make any decisions about what to do next, tragedy struck. In June of 1999, his father, Fred Trump, died. Donald was heartbroken, but publicly, he used the occasion to reminisce about his favorite subject, himself. He said it was ironic to have learned about his father's death after reading a New York Times front-page story about one of his successful developments. After his father's funeral, Trump turned his focus back to the question he had been mulling over since before his father's death. Should he run for president? He eventually did sort of run. But it wasn't as a Republican or a Democrat. Instead, he ran for the party that, out of nowhere, had emerged as a real force in American politics. You see, before Donald Trump, there was another successful businessman who made a massive impact on U.S. politics. His name was Ross Perot. He ran for president in 1992 and 1996. Perot introduced Americans to a new kind of politics. His views didn't fit into either the Republican or Democrat columns. From his luxurious penthouse, Donald Trump was watching the successful CEO who had just shaken America's politics. And he knew he had way more name recognition. If he ran, what would stop him from winning? So, Trump joined the Reform Party. He formed an exploratory committee, went on talk shows, took a high-profile campaign swing to California, and vowed to spend $100 million to win not just the Reform Party's nomination, but the presidency. He published a book outlining his policy proposals, and he won the Reform Party's California primary, and it looked like he would win the entire nomination. But just as quickly as he entered the race, Trump dropped out. In around 2010, an eruption of anger about issues that had been bubbling up under the surface for years, such as federal bailouts, corporate welfare, and government overreach, inspired Republicans to want to vote for someone who wasn't afraid to throw a punch, someone they knew and liked, and someone who wasn't afraid to say some pretty outrageous things. But who would be their champion? In 2011, Trump spoke at a high-profile Republican conference and started calling Republican candidates losers. It was classic Trump. But what was new was his claims that Obama came out of nowhere. Trump gave the most popular speech of the entire conference. But asking questions about where Obama was born was a strategy aimed at exploiting people's racial biases, because doing so helped generate publicity. But we know this guy by now. He is fueled by endless desire to win and be recognized for it. And he had a pretty tried and true playbook to do it. So, in 2015, Trump descended an escalator at Trump Tower and threw himself into the spotlight that he knows so well.
At Trump Tower, it's great to be in a wonderful city, New York. I am officially running for President of the United States, and we are going to make our country great again.
Trump's candidacy was a comeback narrative. He had engineered one of the most comebacks in history. So, he could do the same for his country. He wielded his tireless work ethic and his ability to inflame and divide and lie and bully all the way into the limelight, and after years of practice on smaller stages. He entered the largest stage of them all and expertly sold the fantasy of being average man, despite having never lived like anything but a king, and it worked. He won. He didn't get the most votes, but he still won, fair and square, and he became the President of the United States for 4 years. And then when he lost, he did what he's always done, what we could have predicted he would do. He fought it. He fought it to the death, attacking the rules of the system that he had lost in, selling his lies to an angry population who believed him. In the 2016 elections, Trump won, but he didn't get the most votes. So, he made a tweet saying that he won the popular votes if we were to deduct the millions of people who voted illegally, and he launched an investigation. Fast forward to 2018, the Donald Trump Voter Fraud Task Force was disbanded without finding any evidence of voter fraud. Then, leading up to the 2020 elections, Trump laid the groundwork early on before the elections.
The only way we're going to lose this election is if the election is rigged. Remember that.
The stage was set for Trump's big lie. November 5th, 2020, with no concession inside or evidence for that matter, Donald Trump picks up a microphone at a press conference to declare the elections fraudulent.
I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us. If you count the votes that came in late. All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing, and stolen by the fake news media. That's what they've done and what they're doing. We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
A catalyst for chaos to come. Not since 1814, over 200 years ago, had the Capitol been overrun by an angry mob. Surrounding the building, thugs from around the world held a grip around the neck of our fragile democracy, suffocating the will of the American people.
And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Despite promising that he'd walk with the protesters, he returns to his hotel to watch the chaos he orchestrated live on TV. Silence from the White House persists, and in the eyes of many, Trump's lack of action contributed to the violence. 4 p.m., President-elect Joe Biden addresses national TV in an attempt to sedate the insurrection.
At this hour, our democracy is under unprecedented assault, unlike anything we've seen in modern times.
2 minutes earlier, Trump enters the Rose Garden at the White House to prepare his own delivery to the nation.
I know your pain. I know you're hurt. We had an election that was stolen from us. It was a landslide election, and everyone knows it, especially the other side. But you have to go home now. We have to have peace. We have to have law and order. We have to respect our great people in law and order. We don't want anybody hurt. It's a very tough period of time. There's never been a time like this where such a thing happened, where they could take it away from all of us, from me, from you, from our country. This was a fraudulent election.
There's a reason why Republicans who understand how power works are scared that he is back, that he is the president again. Dick Cheney, Republican former vice president, said that in our nation's 248-year history, there has never been an individual who is a greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump. He tried to steal the election, using lies and violence to keep himself in power. After the voters rejected him, he can never be trusted with power again. Donald Trump has a tried and true playbook, and he will use it over and over again.
Biden is a failed president. She was a failed vice president. The worst president in the history, the worst vice president in history. He is incompetent. She's incompetent. She can't talk. She can't talk. Low IQ. He's a low IQ individual. She happens to be really a low IQ individual. She really does. She has a very low IQ.
Donald Trump is like a practical joke that got out of hand.
He's detached from reality.